In my opinion, TF2x10 has unjustly earned the reputation of being a game mode that's kind of fun just to screw around in, but is so unbalanced that it's unplayable. But I would agree with the sentiment that not many people understand what's going on in this mode. So in this video series, I want to kind of shed some light onto some of the intricate details of TF2x10, go through every weapon that each class has, talk about how good it is, how bad it is, and when it might be used, and in general kind of explain what the heck to actually do. I've already explained all the rules for the tiering in this video right here, so if you're new to the series, I would encourage you to check that one out first and work your way down the playlist, but all the tiers are exactly the same in this video as they've been, so I'm just going to get right into it. Demoman in TF2x10 is kind of two different classes, if we're being honest. Like, Demoman using explosives is alright. He has some decent options that he can do, usually for defensive purposes. I think that's really where explosive Demoman shines, but Demoknight, on the other hand, is a beast. I mean, Demoknight has really good speed, really good mobility, halfway decent damage. I mean, the damage mostly comes from one weapon that's not like an actual weapon, so to speak, so I'll get to that when I get to that, but Demoknight in general has really all of the things that you would want in a class in TF2x10, and I consider him to be like kind of a side grade to heavy that's kind of worse. It's kind of hard to like talk about them though without talking about the weapons specifically, so let's get into it, starting with the grenade launchers. The stock grenade launcher is a pretty cool weapon in TF2x10 because what they modified it to do is basically work similarly to how the Beggar's Bazooka works, where it's kind of inaccurate, but you can like load a bunch of things into the chamber and fire them all at once and they just kind of go everywhere. The grenade launcher though doesn't have any like damage penalty or fall off or whatever, so it's pretty easy to just kind of like load 10 grenades into the thing, fire them wherever you want to generally aim, and have a large portion of the map explode all at the same time. I wouldn't say that the grenade launcher is particularly good for directly dealing with damage, although, like, mathematically speaking, because you're firing basically 10 grenades at a time, one of them's gonna hit your target at the very minimum. It's not that hard to have at least 2 or 3 hit, and because of that, I mean, like, dealing with targets 200 HP and below is relatively simple with a grenade launcher if you, like, already have it loaded. Because the reload speed has been increased so much, it's actually not that hard to load 10 things into the chamber and to kind of like be prepared. As long as you can last like a couple seconds without dying, you'll have enough time to load enough to be able to sufficiently retaliate against somebody who's attacking you. I think where the grenade launcher excels though is if you're not too picky about what specifically explodes, as long as you want a large portion of everything to explode. For instance, if you're dealing with like the payload or something and you're trying to clear people off of it, this is a really good tool to do so because you can just kind of like load 10 grenades up, fire them all at the same time, and even if they don't directly hit your target on the way to the payload, I mean, they do sit on the ground for a bit, and the splash damage that kind of occurs after that does cause like significant chip damage, especially because there's just so many grenades exploding at the same time. One of the bigger downsides with this though is, other than I guess not being able to hit what you're aiming for sometimes, I find that ammo runs out really quickly. Because of the stat that prevents you from getting ammo from dispensers while you're holding it, you basically have to, like, pause every time you run out of ammo, switch to, like, your sticky bomb or melee or something to regain that ammo, or alternatively just, like, get an ammo pack or something and then resume firing. So having basically an infinite barrage of grenades rain upon something is not really possible unless you have 2 Demomen doing it. But the grenade launcher in general, though, because, I mean, it just has, like, consistently sustained DPS, I think is a great weapon for the primary slot. So I'm going to put it in always a great pick. I mean, like, honest to God, I think this is like one of the only grenade launchers that's actually consistently good to use. Again, you don't really need like the precise aim when you just blow up everything, and what you're aiming at is generally part of everything, so I don't really have any problems with the inaccuracy unless I'm trying to like tap fire one at a time, which just isn't really a good idea to begin with. The lock and load, along with all of the weapons that have a smaller explosion radius, has an unfortunate glitch in TF2x10, where sometimes if you shoot things, the explosion won't do any damage. I have no idea what causes this, I have no idea how to fix this, but it is an unfortunate glitch that exists. Looking at what the lock and load is supposed to do doesn't make it much better. It's basically a single shot weapon which does a lot of damage to buildings. It has a pretty fast projectile speed, so you don't have to like lead your shots as much. It's pretty easy to hit targets, and I mean, like, even though it only has 1 ammo per clip, it reloads pretty quickly. If you just treat it as like an infinite ammo weapon with like lower firing speed, I think that's a better way to look at it. Unfortunately though, it's really hard for me to get around the fact that, like, even though this does have better damage against buildings, number one, it's just a worse version of like other weapons like the direct hit, so I wouldn't really want to like choose Demoman to counter buildings anyway. Number two, it has worse damage than just like barraging buildings with a grenade launcher. And number three, half the time I hit buildings, the grenade doesn't even do any damage, because on top of exploding and not doing any damage, the shattering on surfaces stat makes it so if you hit buildings from specific angles, the grenade doesn't even explode, it just shatters. So it's like really hard to actually get this to work as intended. And because of that, I think this is like too inconsistent to realistically be usable in any situation ever. If this worked 100% of the time as intended, I think it would have like a couple uses that you might want to choose it for, but it's just so inconsistent. Honest to God, never choose this thing. I'm gonna put it in bad. I can't handle it. I really can't. Now, if you disagree, imagine like the grenade launcher in stock TF2. Imagine like if you shot it at somebody, it had a 50% chance to just do the like miss effect that happens when you shoot somebody that has like the bonk atomic punch active, and it was completely random. I think that's a pretty good analogy to what using this thing feels like. It's just so frustrating to use, and like I would rather have a weapon that consistently does half damage than randomly doing full damage half the time. It's just like, the RNG is so bad on this. I really can't bring myself to use this ever. Next up is the loose cannon, which is pretty similar to what it is normally, except they made the projectile speed so high that the projectiles now move erratically, which I didn't even know was possible to do in the Source engine, and the knockback is still a decent amount. It has been increased for sure. Like, you are going to knock people like pretty much to the moon, but in terms of like what this realistically should do to be a really good weapon, it doesn't really fit the criteria that anyone was hoping for. However, the loose cannon can also be used as something that you can like charge up and just knock yourself back with, and the increased knockback, I'm pretty sure allows you to have slightly higher cannonball jumping potential. I've not tested it to like any great degree, but like just using this in TF2x10 versus stock TF2, I don't know, I've just felt a difference, so it could be my imagination. So if you have experience with this in TF2x10, be free to let me know. I'd be curious to hear. But anyway, the loose cannon used as a grenade launcher kind of sucks. It has pretty bad damage. The knockback effect, because it launches vertically instead of like horizontally, I haven't really found that many good uses for. If you hit somebody, like if you try to knock them off a cliff or something, I think that should be the main use of the loose cannon, is basically a long-ranged air blast. But like, again, because it knocks people at like a 60-ish degree angle, anybody who knows how to strafe is going to be able to avoid whatever you're trying to knock them into. Double donks are kind of frustrating to aim too, because like, I mean, sure, they can do a lot of damage, but like, because this thing charges like a little bit faster, then it doesn't really make me want to try for double donks ever. Like, it's honestly better to just like knock people back. The only thing that I can think you'd really want to use this for ever is like cannon jumping. And I mean, cannon jumping's pretty good. Like, if you're using this with like a hybrid knight set, or alternatively, if you want a grenade launcher that's used for mobility, if you want to like run this with like the sticky bomb or the Scottish resistance or something, I think that would fit that niche. But in terms of like damage, just don't use this for damage. It's really bad. I'm gonna throw this in only 1 or 2 uses outside of cannon jumping. I can't really see why anyone would want to use this. Just again, like, none of the effects that it has are like particularly good in my opinion, but I mean, you can experiment around with this and probably have a lot of fun with it. I think this does have like more potential for fun than it does for actually killing people. Last grenade launcher is the Iron Bomber, which, because it has the explosion radius penalty, does suffer from a lot of the same problems as the lock and load. However, because the Iron Bomber is bugged, not just in TF2x10, but in vanilla TF2 as well, where the grenades use the bounding box as the calculator for hitting instead of the, like, hit box, it actually kind of negates it. It's a little bit easier to hit than the lock and load. Just a little bit, though. It's not that much. The Iron Bomber itself is kind of like a weird choice for some of the stats they included, where it basically fires all 4 of the grenades at the same time because of the increased firing speed. It doesn't reload any faster, so you basically have to hit that one, like, super grenade, otherwise you're spending a couple seconds reloading. But I mean, if you can hit people directly, then and all the grenades explode, that's the other caveat that usually doesn't happen, you can get up to 400 damage. Usually what happens is that I only get up to 200 damage. I don't know why. Again, it's very inconsistent, but it does do a lot more damage consistently than the lock and load, which isn't a very high bar to beat, mind you, but I think in terms of, like, direct DPS, this is probably the best thing if you want to aim precisely. So as much as I don't particularly like this relying on RNG, I think the RNG is a little bit more mitigatable than the lock and load, and because this does have a lot more potential for direct hit damage than the lock and load, I think this is, like, generally a more useful weapon. So I'm going to put it in... I think consistently average is a pretty good place for it. Honestly, I would still rather use the stock grenade launcher, but I don't know if that's just, like, personal preference, or if the stock grenade launcher is just better. You can get decent use out of this. I think there is, like, definitely potential if you learn to use it right. There are just a lot of inconsistencies that I think prevents this from being, like, a great pick all the time. The base jumper is kind of a weird case. I think Soldier and Demoman both have, like, one really good use for this, and that is market gardening. Demoman does have a market gardener. I'll get to that in melees, but because the market gardener for Demo is worse than Soldier, and because Demoman has a lot higher potential for single jumps with the sticky bomb launcher, I think Demoman generally finds more use out of the base jumper than Soldier. That being said, though, if you're not sticky bomb jumping and market gardening, probably at the same time, you basically have to be using those 2 weapons, don't use this. This is a waste of a primary slot otherwise, but if you're doing that playstyle, it can be good. So this is like the textbook definition of an only 1 or 2 use weapon. I mean, like, it really is only good for parachuting, and it makes market gardening a little bit easier. I know the Soldier, I'll talk more about the Soldier market gardener, but it has modifications that make it easier to hit. Demoman's don't, and because you don't have the, like, quick adjustments with the sticky bomb launcher that you would have with the rocket jumper, just to, like, direct yourself at somebody, then yeah, I think the base jumper has very, very slightly more uses for Demoman than it does Soldier, but it's still not that many. And last but certainly not least, for primaries, we get to the Bootleggers / Alibaba's Wee Booties. They both do the same thing. These are really, really, really nice weapons because they occupy a role in vanilla TF2, which is a minor stat boost across the board, which in TF2x10 becomes a massive stat boost across the board. This does almost exactly what you'd think it would do because it basically just gives you really good movement speed all the time. It gives you a ton of max health up to, like, 425. It makes it so all of your shields are the Tide Turner, which is very helpful, as we'll see when we get to shields, and it also makes it so all of your swords immediately get their charge back if you kill, I mean, just with the sword, which isn't particularly useful if you're not using a sword, but you probably should be, if we're being honest. I don't really know what to say about this, except it's a stat stick, and in the Bootleggers case, it's literally a stat stick because one of the legs is a stick. That was a really bad joke. We're gonna put this in meat. Literally use this if you don't want a grenade launcher. If we're being honest, I think the utility of having a lot of health and being really fast is, like, better than a grenade launcher, even if you're not playing Demoknight. It's just really hard for me to ignore the fact that, like, this makes you, like, comparable to a heavy in terms of health and speed, and it only gets better when you're using, like, shields and swords, which, I mean, you probably should be with Demoman, but these are just, like, one of the best weapons for any playstyle that doesn't involve a grenade launcher directly, so these are just best all the time. On to secondaries. I've grouped these secondaries into the sticky bomb launchers and the shields. I think they occupy very, very different playstyles, so I'm going to be comparing sticky bomb launchers with other sticky bomb launchers and shields with other shields with minimal crossover, just because, again, like, the reason you'd want to choose them is very different. Realistically, I should be doing 2 different tier lists, one for Demoknight and one for Demoman, but they would be very short videos, so I'm going to keep them all in one. Anyway, let's go to the stock sticky bomb launcher. The stock sticky bomb launcher really doesn't have any changes in TF2x10. The only adjustment that it has is, I think, a 10 times multiplied ammo reserve, which, I mean, if you're spamming so much with a sticky bomb launcher that ammo reserves are a problem, spam less. Like, that's kind of the solution to your problem there. And because the sticky bomb launcher gets kills enough that you really shouldn't be worried about ammo, because you get half of it back every time you get a kill, that's even less reason for that to matter. I think the sticky bomb launcher, even though it doesn't have any changes in TF2x10, I mean, a lot of people consider it one of the best weapons in normal TF2, so, like, at least it has that carryover with it, but I just don't think it has the same, like, general appeal in TF2x10. It's never going to be a bad weapon for you, but in terms of, like, the things that it could do, which is sticky spamming, I mean, I just don't think sticky spamming is as helpful because everybody's so fast. So, I'll put it in consistently average. I think this is, like, always going to be at least kind of good, but, if you choose a sticky bomb launcher, it's going to be for defensive purposes anyway, so there are better things that do that job. Which, speak of the devil, we now have the Scottish Resistance. This thing is kind of one of the, like, it was like the poster child for TF2x10 because it's the perfect amount of ridiculous and, like, barely usefulness to where everybody sees it and they're like, holy balls, look at all the upsides on this. This must be a perfect weapon. And then they use it and they, like, fire tons of sticky bombs and they can have a bunch. I don't know. It's just, like, the perfect amount of chaotic to where everybody gravitates toward this in their first or second time playing this mode, which is fine. It's, like, it's kind of a decent weapon. I mean, like, it does allow you to lay down a lot of sticky bombs, up to, I think, 68, if my memory serves me correct. And, I mean, it fires really fast. The sticky bombs themselves don't have any, like, damage penalty. The problem with it is that you have to plan really far ahead if you're using this thing, because the sticky bombs take so long to activate that if you shoot a sticky bomb down and a medic pops Uber at the same time, the medic's Uber will run out at the same time that you can detonate it. It takes quite a while, and it's not as good for spamming. However, I mean, it kind of is, because you can just, like, put down sticky bombs in so many locations at the same time that realistically you don't have to, like, precisely try to set up any traps. You just make a carpet down over the map and then just detonate whichever portion people happen to be standing on. What I will say about the Scottish Resistance, though, is that it does get hard countered by the Scorch Shot. If somebody shoots a Scorch Shot even close to, like, your big pile of sticky bombs, they all just go away. You have to put all of them down again. And the ammo, even though it does have increased ammo, I still find myself running out of it really quick. So, I mean, like, because you're just firing so many stickies at, like, once, it kind of is a problem. But if you're not facing those two problems, or I guess if you have, like, an immediate solution to the ammo problem as well, then this does become a really killer weapon for defense. I don't personally see this used as much for, like, TF2x10 higher tower, because, I mean, like, people aren't really trying to cap in that anyway. However, if you do play a proper game of TF2x10, like, with active objectives and stuff, this becomes really good at defense, just because you can completely shut down an area, and someone literally has to go, like, dedicated sticky cleaner to get rid of them. So, because of that, I'll put this in situationally useful. Ironically, I think this is a better weapon than the stock sticky bomb launcher. It's just because of the way I've set up the tier list. The literal vertical tiering doesn't reflect that as much. But this just dominates defense. Like, in terms of what you can use for defensive capability, this is about it. You don't really want anything else. The sticky jumper. This is another one that's, like, an equally amount of chaotic that, like, people love to use. But unlike the Scottish Resistance, I think this is, like, genuinely fantastic. Because they not only took off the normal limit of the only 2 sticky bombs you can have out at a time, but they increased that to, like, 68 again, so you can literally have a pile of sticky jumper thingies, and then you can detonate them all at the same time to go to the stratosphere. It's basically an open invitation to NASA, so I'm just going to, Actually, yeah, I'll bring back my higher tower gold star of approval. I think Demoman especially wants that. But, yeah, this thing is like the golden child. This gets like my platinum higher tower star of approval, honestly, because this is just so efficient at climbing. But yeah, other than climbing the higher tower, I think, like, the exceptional use for this is kind of limited. I can't ignore, though, that in terms of mobility, this is about the best you're going to get in this mode because it's completely free. You don't have to worry about, like, taking self-damage when you use it. You get a lot of distance per jump. It only requires a little bit of setup to use because I think, like, I did testing at one point. I'm trying to remember what the results were. I'm pretty sure, like, 2 sticky bombs is the most you need for, like, most jumps, and then up to 6 is what you need if you're, like, trying to go, like, crazy distances, like climbing the higher tower. After 6, you really are gonna get diminishing returns. Like, I found minimal difference between, like, 6 and 12, for instance. And the more sticky bombs you have on the ground, the harder it is to stand, like, directly in the center of all of them, so the chances of you, like, flying kind of off to the side and, like, going in an angle you don't want is higher, but it does allow you to get around, like, really long distances really quick, basically for free. That's the strength of this weapon, and because of that, honestly, the mobility on this is just so good that I think you can use it with about any other weapon, and I would honestly, I usually use this over other sticky bomb launchers just because it's so fun to fly around the map. So I'm going to put this... This might be a little bit biased, but I'm going to put this in always a great pick. Even if you're using a sword, like, obviously, if you're using a secondary-based playstyle and you want to get damage out of your secondary, this isn't a good one. This does 0 damage on your secondary. However, if you're playing with a grenade launcher or even with a sword in a lot of cases, I think this can be almost effective as a shield because, like, not only can you, like, jump toward people, but you have an infinite amount of mobility as long as you have time to, like, shoot down stickies and align yourself while jumping. And if you can get the hang of, like, mid-air jumping, because this has pretty much a bottomless clip, you can actually, like, pogo forever. So this has a really high skill cap. I unfortunately have not hit it yet, but the mobility that this offers is pretty much unparalleled with anything else in the mode. So I'll put it up there just because I think this really can work with, like, any other weapon in the game if you really want it to. The last sticky bomb launcher in the game is one that I'm really sad about. The Quickie Bomb used to be almost, no, I think it literally was, like, the best weapon in TF2x10 by a long shot, because it used to have no damage penalty. It got insane damage when you charged it. It charged instantaneously. It detonated instantaneously. The flexibility that you had with this was really, really nice. However, this was, because it was, like, so dominant, this was the only weapon in the game that the TF2x10 team, back before this went to open source, had, like, officially acknowledged that they nerfed. Twice, in fact, because the first nerf wasn't enough, and people still complained about this, so they just kind of obliterated the poor thing. Now, I can't think of any single reason why you'd want to use this. It's basically the sticky bomb launcher, but it shoots instantly and has a lot of really cool positives that are all negated because it does 0 damage all the time. And just to spit in your face a little bit more, the 0 damage that it does to other players doesn't apply to yourself. You still take self-blast damage when you're jumping with this, so you can't use this as, like, a side grade to the sticky jumper. I don't really know why you'd use this. Literally, the only thing that I have found to get situational use out of this with is because you can shoot and detonate the sticky bomb launcher instantly, you can basically use this as a low-skill way to pogo without having to, like, plan ahead like you do with, like, other sticky bomb launchers. However, you can't do it infinitely because you still take blast damage, so I mean, what's the point? This literally is just a directly worse version of every other sticky bomb launcher in the game. There's no reason to use this ever. It's a direct downgrade from literally everything, so it's just going in bad. I kind of wish they'd restore this to, like... Honestly, I wouldn't even be mad if they restored how ridiculous it was originally. Especially because a lot of, like, TF2x10 weapons got buffed alongside their vanilla buffs, similarly to in, like, I think Meet Your Match and then the Pyro update that Jungle Inferno, sorry. Those, because, like, weapons got buffed in vanilla TF2, those buffs carried over, and the meta shifted a little bit. I think this being restored to its former glory would be appreciated, and it would make, like, stock Demoman a lot better than Demoknight, or at least comparable, because stock Demoman right now just sucks. Like, there's no reason to use any of the explosive weapons, except in, like, defensive situations. So, okay, let's move on to the shields. The shields... I mean, the shields basically are Demoman's secondaries, if we're being honest. They're so good because the resistances that they have are ramped up. One of the shields is so much better than the other ones because it does a lot of damage. There's only one that does a lot of damage, so I've kind of spoiled it already. But I'll talk about all of them because I think they all have their uses. But there is one that makes Demoman really, really good. The Charge and Targe is not the one that makes Demoman really, really good, but it is pretty good in its own right because the stats that it has are that the explosive damage was just turned up from, like, whatever it was, I think, like, 40%. Just to 100, so you're now immune to all explosives. Explosives aren't really in a good spot in TF2x10, so you might think this is like kind of a useless change. However, it does hard counter the direct hit, which makes it like immediately really, really good because otherwise the direct hit is like kind of difficult to deal with if you don't have an air blasting pyro on your team. So because of that, because you can just kind of like run right up to direct hit soldiers, they can shoot you as much as they want and it'll only mildly inconvenience you. I think that's like enough of a reason to put this in at least situationally useful. If this like negated self damage that you can take, like if it was if it made loose cannon jumping free, or especially if it negated critical hits as well, because critical hits pierce damage resistance. Fun fact that I learned the hard way. I would put this a lot higher, but I think really this is just a direct hit deleter, and it can be used for other things too, like if you want to counter like stock Demoman like grenade launcher spammers, or even like black box soldiers might cause problems originally. So there's plenty of things you can try with this, but really it really just is like the middle finger to the direct hit. That's the main use that I found for this. Other than that, there are better options. One such better option is the Splendid Screen. The Splendid Screen, it's kind of hard to, like, talk about how ridiculous this thing is in terms of damage without putting numbers out there. Here's some numbers. 340, 515. Okay, there's, like, the main two that are relevant. This does 340 damage on a direct impact with any other weapon that's not the Islander, and if you have max heads, this actually does do, like, 515 damage on impact, which, I mean... That's a lot of damage. That allows you to remove most people pretty quickly. It's not like 340 damage won't remove most people quickly, but really you can just make this as ridiculous as you want by stacking Islander heads. This thing allows Demoknight to complete the trifecta of damage, mobility, and survivability, because on top of allowing you to have like more shield charges, it also allows you to have the like minimal damage resistances, and it's a delete button. So really this kind of covers everything by itself, but it also adds to like the ridiculousness that like stuff like the wee booties would add, the Islander and other swords would add. This just like honestly, this is the best shield with pretty much every single sword in the game, so because of that, it's immediately going to be meta because some of the swords are really good. But it's also the thing that allows Demoknight to have, like, really good damage, because otherwise he'd only be hitting, like, 65s, which is way worse than pretty much everyone else in the game, especially because he's locked to melee, so that's, like, doubly insulting. But yeah, the Splendid Screen allows him to compete with Heavy by having, like, really good burst damage compared to, like, really good sustained damage. So I'm just gonna throw this in meat. I think this is it's probably, yeah, it's better than the wee booties, I guess the bootlegger, because it's just like it's good with every sword. I guess both of these are, but this provides him with a unique function that he wouldn't otherwise get. So really, if you want a shield, use the Splendid Screen. There's no reason not to, unless... Let's get to the Tide Turner now. The Tide Turner is an unfortunate victim of theft. All of its unique functions have been stolen by the wee booties in the bootlegger, because the turning radius has been increased by those. The instant refill of charge has been stolen by those. So the only reason that you'd want to use the Tide Turner is if you're not using the wee booties of the bootlegger. I don't know why you would be not using those if you're using a sword, but if you wanted to run Hybrid Knight with, like, the loose cannon or something, feel free to use the Tide Turner. I will say, though, that they were kind of smart when they designed this in TF2x10. They did give the Tide Turner better resistances than the Splendid Screen, otherwise it would just be garbage. But yeah, this does have like a 50% damage resistance for both fire and explosives, which is pretty nice. I mean, it's not like charge and targe nice, but especially because like you have better mobility, I think this can occasionally be better than the charge and targe. However, just because like again the like unique function that this has of having like perfect mobility doesn't really exist anymore, and the only things that you'd want to use this with normally, which are like the I guess the loose cannon still works, but the the Claymore, okay, it's not as good because, like, realistically, you want to be using every sword with a Splendid Screen to have that extra damage. So I'll put this in only 1 or 2 uses. The only one that I think really stands out to me is cannon jumping, or if you just want to run, like, a grenade launcher, that's also fine. But outside of that, realistically, you shouldn't be worried about this too much. And I'll at least put this above the other things in this category. I think this is, like, serviceable in its own right. It's just, like, it's just a worse version of these two meta items combined, which is kind of an unfair comparison, but you should be using these two anyways, so yeah, this just kind of got shafted, if we're being honest. On to the melees. The melees, I think, for the most part, are all significantly balanced, or at least they all have their own uses. There aren't any that I think they just completely just stuck the middle finger to and said, this weapon is just destined to suck. They all have decent use. The bottle, for instance, is basically a market gardener. I talked about that a little bit when I was talking about the sticky bomb launchers, but the bottle just allows you to have critical hits while you're falling, which is kind of dumb because it can also get random crits. So like sometimes I get like the random crit animation and I'm like, well, was I even in the air when I hit this guy, or did I just get lucky? It's kind of hard to improve with, but like if you're competent with sticky bomb jumping and you're confident with market gardening, you'll get decent use out of this. That being said, it only does like 195, which I think realistically you can beat out with swords. I think, like, this does serve a purpose of having fun pretty well, because it is a lot of fun to fly around and try to market garden people, and if you're willing to use this with the base jumper, then you'll probably have a little bit of an easier time using it, just because it doesn't have, like, any other stats other than it just does crits on targets while you're blast jumping. But yeah, I just, outside of market gardening, don't use this. It's not like the best thing ever, but it is a lot of fun. I will give it that. So I'll put it in only 1 or 2 uses. Really, the one use is market gardening. Otherwise, there are just like directly better options that you could choose from. The Scottish Handshake, a lot of you might be confused of why I put this on here separately. It actually does something different than the bottle, and I'm kind of glad they did choose different stats, because the different ones are pretty creative. The stats that this has is basically an immunity to like damage push force. I am 90% sure that this does not work with Air Blast, which is unfortunate because, I mean, that would make it really good. If it did do that, it would mean that Demoknight would have a viable way to counter Air Blast Pyros, which would be really nice, but because it doesn't, I don't think this really has a legitimate upside. Theoretically, it has plus 300% self-damage force as well. I couldn't really tell a difference. I did some, like, loose cannon jumping with and without this, as well as sticky jumping. I couldn't really tell a difference, but maybe there is some, and I just wasn't paying attention. This is another one that, like, if you know what this does specifically, because, like, again, because every server runs different things, there's a number of reasons why the wiki might be wrong or why I might be wrong, and it's kind of hard for me to, like, flush out the problem there. So I'm going to put this in the only 1 or 2 uses tier. However, if you know for a fact that this either does or does not counter Air Blast, or if this does or does not improve, like, sticky jumping force, let me know in the comments. I'm very curious to kind of get a sense of what this actually does. I didn't even know this had different stats from the bottle until I, like, started recording stuff for this. It's just weird. It's one of those things that it's like, it slips through the cracks because, like, you just forget this weapon even exists. But if it did work as intended, that would be really cool, and I'm kind of hoping it does, because that's such a unique weapon design that would be, like, on a reskin for some reason. On to the frying pan slash all of the melee reskins that are like all class. They all do the same thing for the most part. I mentioned this in the heavy one, but the frying pan itself has like 10% damage and 10% firing speed bonuses, and then all of the other ones just have a 20% firing speed bonus. But all of them have, arguably what's the best stat on these is fall damage immunity. This will get my higher tower golden star of approval for Demoman because being able to use the sticky bomb jumper and not having to take fall damage is really, really nice. Fall damage, especially for Demoman, like scales dramatically just because he has a lot of max health potentially. So being able to equip something and avoid all of that's really nice. And it's also, it is just a better version of the bottle if you're not market gardening. I mean, like, a stock melee that has, like, extra firing speed and damage and can still get random crits is nice. Like, people forget how good the stock melees are because they're a lot better utility options. So, I'm gonna put this in, I think... Honestly, it is always a great pick. I can't really think of a class, like, even Demoknight kind of wants firing speed. Although, I'll put it in consistently average. I'll put it at the top of there because, like, I don't think this excels with Demoknight, but this is really, really nice for stock Demoman, so, it does do its functions pretty well and makes generally quality of nice stuff go all the way up. Alright, now we're on the big boys. The Eyelander is fantastic, to say the least. What they ended up giving this is a slightly longer melee range. The stat that's listed is plus 187%. I'm not sure whether it's like added on to the like default sword increases or if it's just like a replacement, but it does have a much longer melee range and is a lot easier to hit with. The 50 max health is kind of negatable, but because this allows you to like stack even more max health once you get heads, because this allows you to, I think, get more movement speed, I'm pretty sure the Bootlegger doesn't hit the 512 hammer units per second cap. It's just a great weapon all around. I really can't think of a reason why you shouldn't want to use the Eyelander. It makes like melee matchups better. It feels really good to use just because of the extra melee range. The extra effects that it has in heads are really good. This is pretty much like the default sword. It pretty much like gives you a little bit of everything, which is really, really nice. And because of that, this is one of my favorites. And I know there are only two people that I will admit are better than me at TF2x10 in a very, I guess, like strict sense. One guy is a friend of mine named Dakish, who I know watches my videos. So hello, Dakish. He plays a lot of Demoknight, and he will testify because he has like double the amount of server points I have on the server network that I play on, and I am in 3rd place in the world. He will testify that this thing makes you invincible, and every once in a while he will send screenshots in my Discord server of him dominating literally everyone else on the enemy team. I know that's very situational evidence, but at the same point, it's just a really good sword. We're going to throw it in meat. Pretty much, if you want to use a sword that gives you a little bit of everything, especially the extra max health really helps, use the Eyelander. It's really nice. I will point out, too, that the Horseless Headless Horseman's Head Taker also does the same thing as the Eyelander. The 9-iron, however, does not. The 9-iron has unique stats. The 9-iron basically gives you, like, really low firing speed. It takes, like, almost twice as long to swing. However, it does have a very slight damage bonus, and it also has knockback on hit. But I think what's most impressive about the 9-iron is that it doesn't have the health penalty that the Eyelander does. So, arguably, I would say that the 9-iron, because it allows you to juggle the people that you're fighting really effectively, like, even though it has lower firing speed, which is kind of annoying, if you can, like, knock people into corners and, like, just keep them there, you're going to kill them really, really quick. It also doesn't have the increased melee range, which is kind of a downside for it compared to the Eyelander, but, again, if you're able to, like, just consistently keep hitting somebody in the corner, you don't have to worry about that because you can, like, kind of prevent somebody from moving, unless they're absolute strafing gods. So, because of that, I think the comparison between the 9-iron and the Eyelander, they both collect heads, they both do about the same thing, but the 9-iron allows you to have a better matchup against single targets that are stronger because you can consistently knock them into corners, you can juggle them, control the fight a little bit more, but the Eyelander has better matchups against, like, if you're fighting a lot of weaker targets in quick succession because, like, it has a longer firing speed, or I guess it has a faster firing speed and a longer melee range. It's just generally suited for like endurance combat versus just like one-on-one. So I'm gonna put the 9-iron right behind the Eyelander. I've seen a lot of debate on which is better. I personally think the Eyelander is, because increased melee range helps a lot, but I could totally see that argument going both ways. They're both really good weapons, and this effectively has a plus 50 max health bonus as well, because like even once you get all the heads, this doesn't have the penalty in the first place, so this allows you to stack it higher. So choose whatever one you want. Again, it's like, it really is up to personal preference, because like both of these are going to be fantastic, but that's my distinction between those, and I'll talk more about that toward the end. But yeah, really good weapons both ways. The Claymore, I'm pretty sure I pronounced that right. The Claymore for the Demoman is a really memey weapon because it allows you to have really long charges. The 0.5 second charge increase, which is just like quality of life basically in normal TF2, has been ramped up to 5 seconds. So you right click and you just kind of like fly around the map for 5 seconds completely uninterrupted. It's really fun to use, especially with the Splendid screen, because like if you happen to ram into somebody, then it's like pretty much an instant delete button, and yeah, it's just a lot of fun to use. I think it's definitely effective because you basically become a permanent hitbox as long as you're using this. Like, really, people can't get close to you or, like, try to, like, wall you out because you do, like, 340 damage if you happen to hit them. It also, another side effect is that because you have a longer charge time, what that actually does behind the scenes is it makes your charge bar drain slower, which means there's a longer period of time that you can get the, like, critical hit from your melee weapon. So, because of that, it actually is, if you, like, know that you're going to be running into, like, I guess, lower health target, like a scout or something. If you melee them, you can get all your charge back in one hit because it also has the restoring charge and like every time you get a kill. So if you are smart about it, you can kind of become a pinball machine. I really like this weapon. I think it's very fun to use. But in terms of effectiveness, it's not lagging too far behind either. I think for Demoknight at least, this is always a great pick. But because this also doesn't have any other downsides, you can get decent use out of this for pretty much every class. Even if you're running like stock Demoman or something, it's basically just like a normal sword or like a long-range melee that doesn't have any particular downsides. So because of that, I mean, you really can get use out of this with every loadout, which I think is kind of nice. The Persian Persuader is another one that just is amazing. Basically, it's like the inverse of the Clade, because instead of having really long charges, you have a lot of normal length charges. It halves the time that it takes for your shield to recharge, which is really, really nice. But in addition, every time you hit somebody with this thing, and not kill them, when you hit them, your entire charge meter refills and you can do another shield bash. So what you can kind of do is like get into the rhythm of like shield bash them with the Splendid screen, hit them with the Persian Persuader, shield bash hit, and you can like drain people of health really quickly. And because you're doing knockback with your shield, you can kind of like keep them in the air that way and like deplete them of health really quick. It is fantastic. It is honestly one of like the best ways for Demoknight to do a lot of damage. And even though you do sacrifice like some of the nice utility that you get with the Eyelander, this is a really good way to be able to deal a lot of damage really quick while still keeping like most of the upsides of Demoknight. Outside of dealing a lot of damage and having a lot of charge increases, though, it doesn't really do much, but I don't think that really matters just because of how ridiculous the upsides are able to stack with you. So I'm just gonna put this in meat. I mean, like, I personally prefer this over the Eyelander. I think it's like really fun to use just because shield charging all over the place is really fun. But I'm gonna put it below the Eyelander because I think the utility and the survivability, I guess especially, that the Eyelander and the 9-iron provides is more valuable for like long-term combat than the Persian Persuader is. The Half-Zat is exactly the same as it is in normal TF2, except the 50% of your max health being restored sword as overheal, I think goes up to like 200%, so basically you multiply your health by 3 every time you get a kill. That becomes really, really nice, especially if you're using things like the Bootlegger, because that's just more health you get, although I think it does cap eventually like 700 or something. It's kind of weird, but it doesn't really go over that much, but you can get a lot of max health with this really, really quickly. Now, obviously, this is the best sword for survivability. I think it's like pretty obvious that even if you can like get one kill every once in a while, kind of like the kunai, this really is the kunai for Demoman. If you can get one kill with this every once in a while, it's kind of hard to die, and it also pairs really well with the Splendid Screen, because, like, if you shield bash somebody with the Splendid Screen, it's also really easy to, like, finish them off with the melee swing, so I think this just, like, pairs really well with everything else in Demoman's kit, and allows Demoknights to have probably more survivability than they need, if we're being honest. Kind of part of playing Demoknight in the first place is knowing where health packs are, but you can just throw caution to the wind. As long as you can get a kill every once in a while, you're going to be in great shape. So I'm just going to throw this in meat, at least for Demoknight. I think that, yeah, it's probably below the Persuader, because again, like, the Eyelander offers also some survivability, but the half-zat, I mean, like, realistically, you shouldn't die if you, like, aren't getting one-shot by things, which does become a lot harder because you should perpetually have the overheal if you're playing it right. So this does allow you to play a lot more aggressively, which is kind of fun and also pretty useful. The last three, I argue, are not very good melee weapons for Demoknight, but they are, I mean, halfway decent for Demoman. The Scotsman Skull Cutter, oh my goodness. This thing, literally, so, like, it has a 99% move speed penalty, which means you can maybe, like, kind of micro-adjust yourself if you're in, like, kind of a bad spot, but you really should switch weapons if you want to move. What this is fun for, the only reason that I've ever seen this used is if you are using the sticky jumper. This is honestly more effective than the bottle. Because, like, you can pull it out and get, like, 300 damage hits. Like, the damage that this deals is really, really nice. It's just, like, again, I think that there are better ways to deal melee damage as Demoman, especially, like, the Persian Persuader is going to be way better, especially when you compare it with the shield, but this is fun. I'll give it that. You have to treat this almost like a minigun, like revving it up, so where you, like, jump at somebody that you want to be close to as you're pulling it out, and then if they're still in range when the thing is completely deployed, then you can have a swing at them. Or alternatively, you just sit, like, behind a wall and just chop people's heads off that come around the corner. That's also fun, but practically, this doesn't have as much use as it does have entertainment potential, which I think goes for a lot of Demoman's weapons, but this one especially. I would be more keen to giving this more credit if you could, like, give yourself aerial adjustments while you're in midair and holding this thing. As it is, you basically have to only pull this out when you're vectored, like, right toward the target that you want to fight, because you actually can't. Okay, you can very slightly, but you barely have any aerial control while you're holding it, just because, like, airspeed control, I think, is based on movement speeds, so because of that, you just have to, like, aim it right at where you want to go, and you can't adjust until you pull it out and put it away again, so it's pretty bad because of that, but it does have, like, really niche uses that you could probably find, so I'll put it in only 1 or 2. I don't think it's, like, quite terrible, even though the movement speed sucks. Don't let the tiering, I guess, dissuade you from at least trying this, though, because it is fun. I won't deny that. The Caber is a very strange choice in TF2x10, because it literally, number one, it's just normally the Caber, but it has 10 charges. But what it also does, for some dumb reason, is you have 100% fire damage resistance on wear. So, okay, I don't know why they would add that. I think there's, like, some expert, yeah. Was it the Expert Ordnance? I think that's what the set was called, that gave him, like, some fire damage resistance. But what fire damage immunity basically means is immunity to the Huo Long, Scorch Shot, and Dragon's Fury. Flamethrower pyros will just air blast you, and that you really can't do anything about that. But those 3 weapons are kind of annoying, and having immunity on wear to those, especially the Huo Long, like, holy crap, Huo Long immunity is massive in TF2x10, but being able to have that's really nice, even if it means you don't have a functional melee weapon, because if you hit somebody, you die. Even if you are able to do damage to them, the damage that you take is inevitably going to be more, so I wouldn't recommend using this as a melee as much as it is just a, hey, please don't catch me on fire tool. Unfortunately, what this does mean is that because you don't have a melee, if somebody's up in your grill, that's really the only way that you're going to be affected by fire damage other than the scorch shot. You don't really have any safe way to deal with, like, Huo Long heavies, because like, you can't really grenade launcher them, because, like, then you'd be doing splash damage to yourself as well. You could use this with the Splendid Screen, but that would also mean that you don't really have a melee to speak of. It's just kind of awkward, because, like, the people who are going to be, like, up in your face doing fire damage, it's just like a staring contest between you both, because neither of you can really do damage. And the heavy, I think the heavy doing the Huo Longing also has the advantage, because he still has the bullets that he can hit you with, so it just kind of sucks. I think fire damage immunity is good, but it's not, like, as good as you might think it would be. So I'll put this in... it's hovering between situationally useful and only 1 or 2 uses, but I think it's going more towards the latter, just because, like, realistically, having a melee that does other things than just something that's, like, passive but you can't use your melee is better. I would much rather have a melee that does damage. So I'll just put it here. No, yeah, I'll put it here. It's like, it's not as good as the Tide Turner, but it's better than everything else. And finally is the Pain Train, which is kind of a meme weapon, but I mean, it is effective with capping. It basically makes your capture rate go from, like, 1 to 11. Now, that doesn't mean, I probably should clear this up, that does not mean that you have 11 times capture rate. That means you have about 4 times capture rate because of how it scales. Now, that scaling also means that having more than 1 Pain Train on an objective is diminishing returns. I think I would much rather have, like, a Demoman that's just using an actually good melee weapon. Even having 3 Pain Train demos, which is a 33% capture rate, that only does 5 times the speed instead of the 4 times the speed that 1 Pain Train demo would do. So you kind of just use one of these only. But if you do have one of these on any objective, it will help speed it up a lot, and you can kind of, like, set aside one person to be the designated capper while everyone else kind of goes off and does their own thing, because, I mean, you really do get, like, it really does just simulate your entire team being on the objective, which is really, really nice, because that means your entire team can be off doing its own thing. Again, I don't see this as much on higher tower, because I don't really see people doing the objective that much. In fact, people probably will kick you if you do the objective on higher tower, but, and if you're playing actual TF2x10, this is really good, because it allows you to be a great support for your team. I'll put this in situationally useful because of that, but if you're not doing the objective, then this is just a direct downgrade, and really there's no reason to use this. So that is my TF2x10 Demoman tier list. As you can see, things are either really good or really mediocre. There's not a whole lot of in-between for Demoman, but he does have a lot of really good choices when he's using Demoknight, so there are plenty of things you can do to diversify your loadout, and you're not kind of, like, really grounded into one single role. You do have some flexibility with what you choose, so let's talk about, like, when you'd want to choose specific things. So first of all, let's talk about Demoknight. That's probably what you're going to be choosing this class for. If you're using Demoknight, I highly, highly encourage you to just use the Splendid Screen and the Bootlegger. The only reason you'd want to use anything but those are in, like, very specific edge cases, which I'll get to, but those are kind of like your really good all-around options that add way more to the class than you'd otherwise be able to get. In terms of swords are kind of up to you. Eyelander, again, is, like, kind of an all-around choice. Same with the Nessie's 9-iron. Those are 2 really good choices for, like, all-around combat. They do pretty much everything. They give you a little bit of health, they give you a little bit of speed, and they give you a little bit of damage by increasing the damage that your Splendid Screen Shield Bash does. It really is like the jack of all trades, and it kind of does master all of them too, so I think This is probably the best one to start out Demoknight with to kind of like get the hang of, but once you do have the hang of Demoknight, you can kind of specialize in one thing if you so wish. The Persian Persuader is the best for damage because I think even with the increased damage that the Eyelander gives for shield bashes, having a shield bash every time you get a melee hit is something that's like really, really good. And you also have a passive like faster recharge, which is kind of nice, but this thing just allows you to like shred people. This like honestly is probably one of the best counters to kunai spies because you outrange them, you're just like knocking them into a corner, you're knocking them about everywhere, and it's like just it does so much damage that you like shred through their HP really, really quick. So this is a great way to like deal with high health targets. It's a great way to really deal with any health targets. You are going to kill people really quick, and in terms of damage, that's your best choice. In terms of pure survivability, obviously the thing that gives you a ton of overheal every time you kill somebody is a good choice. I think this is best paired with, no, I was going to say it's best paired with the charge and targe, but I would still use it with the Splendid Screen because you kind of do miss the damage. Use this if you're just dying a lot and there's like a ton of stuff on the server that's killing you. Especially because, like, you don't lose the extra max health that you do with the Eyelander, so it is kind of nice to be able to have, like, a permanent free overheal as long as you can get a kill. Really, survivability is what I'm trying to say is this is good for. The Claymore should be the pick for mobility, but I don't think Demoknight really misses mobility that much anyway. It's fun. It's really good to just, like, fly around the map, kind of, like, be evasive, like, move in and out of everywhere, but outside of that, I don't think this is as solid as a pick as everything else. Honestly, I would rather just like always be in combat and then use the Persian Persuader to get more shield bashes than I would like kind of get one cheeky shield bash. But this is really effective, just not as effective as everything else in the meta tier. But you can try this out if you want. It is a lot of fun. In terms of the other shields that you could use for a Demoknight playstyle, the Charge and Targe basically equip this if there's like a really good direct hit soldier on the server, you will ruin his day, and the Tide Turner is really good for Hybrid Knight. Those are the only situations where I think those two really excel, although I guess I am giving the Charge and Targe too little credit because really explosive immunity will ruin the day of anybody who is using explosives, so that's kind of the situation where you'd want to do that, although again, I think killing people with the Splendid Screen is just like a much more efficient option. Ironically, even though stock Demoman isn't as good, I think he does have a bit more flexibility than Demoknight just because there are more things to run. Then again, if you're playing like explosive Demoman, you're probably playing to have fun anyway and not to get results, so I guess that kind of does loosen things up a little bit. The stock grenade launcher is the best for area denial, such as like on objectives or whatever, and kind of the Iron Bomber is the best for single target damage, although like I said, it is pretty inconsistent, so use it at your own risk, but those are going to be pretty good. The other two, I mean, like the loose cannon is good for cannon jumping if you're running Hybrid Knight, and the lock and load's good for masochism if you're into that, so I mean, those are the uses that those would have. And then the sticky bomb launchers, I mean, they're all pretty cut and dry. The Sticky Jumper's mobility, stock is kind of all around. The Scottish Resistance is if you're doing like defense, and the Quickie Bomb Launcher is if you hate yourself. So that's pretty much it. That's the only reasons why you'd want to equip those. And melees, I mean, I kind of just talked about when I brought them up. They all really only do one thing each, so I'm not going to go through those again. But yeah, Demoman, specifically Demoknight, is a really fun class to play. I think Demoknight is definitely one of the better classes in TF2x10 just because of the amount of things he has at his disposal. So try him out. He does take a little bit more use to get the hang of, but I think once you do get the hang of him, he is a pretty decent side grade to someone like Heavy. So anyway, if you want to see other classes next, let me know which. I think the order that I'm doing is probably going to be Soldier, then Pyro, then Sniper, and then I'll figure out the rest from there because I have to do more research. But I am willing to break that order if you really want to see something, so just let me know, and I might consider adjusting just for you. So as always, if you have any feedback for this series, leave me a comment. Otherwise, have a good one.